Hello, mandatory minstrels, and thank you to Sabina Sam and Christian Muller for providing a malt mention for Ralphie Review 890. Yeah, nearly forgot which one it was there because there's been so many. Welcome, malt mates and whisky fans, to the Bothy. I'm your host, Ralphie. I am providing little malt moments, and I have a malt here to assist in providing that moment. Before I go any further, just to let you know, as a brief point of reference, that here in Ralphie Review 890 right up to 900, I'm going to be reviewing widely available, easily recognised, accessible, affordable single malts, because for most of 2021 I've been having fairly long series on independent bottlings, but I do realise that not that many have access to these styles of bottlings, and importantly, some of those who do are only just starting in whisky and perhaps are really not ready for the greater smell and taste challenges that can come from independent bottlings simply because of the integrity of their presentation. So it's your standard whiskies like this, which I would say are a good place to start. They're perfectly decent and acceptable. And I am going to give you a review of this Deveron 10-year-old single malt whisky from Scotland. And they describe it on the label as a Highland whisky. But in fact, it's from Speyside region. And you'll find that, although fairly early on in your journey, you get to know the different regions and how they impact and profile and flavour and what your expectations might be of characteristics. There are a number of Speyside whiskies, single malts, which they don't mention Speyside in the presentation as much as Highland. Now, for the record, all Speyside whiskies are Highland whiskies. However, they are in the region of Speyside and technically should be named Speyside whiskies. Many are, some aren't. And this whole designation goes back to the early days when master blenders and blending suites for the big whisky companies would separate all their single malts into different categories to make it easier to mix, match and blend with. So there you have it. Something that stuck. This whisky is bottled at 40%. And it's not necessarily the same Deveron that you'll see in the specialist whisky shops that have the diamond-shaped label. This one's been bottled for supermarkets, and I bought it in a supermarket for about £25, which I think is a fair price for a young, matured, age-stated single malt. Sure, it's bottled at 40%. Sure, it's chill filtered. Sure, there's a little bit of caramel added, but in my opinion, not that much. So I've poured a glass, I'm going to smell it, and I'm going to taste it. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it. Unpeated. Light, fruity, cereal, lightly honey, slightly crispy in the nose, just a hint of cask char, vanilla, definitely. Simple. And if I was to sum up this whisky in one single word, it's simple. Even in the nose, you're getting what I would describe as a very accessible whisky for people who are trying their first ever single malt. It's even less demanding and less threatening than Glenfiddich 12-year-old. There you go. First taste. You don't have to add any water. Appley, toffee, slightly gingery. Simple arrival, simple development, and a very swift finish. I shall add a drop of water, but not much. Can I get a drip in this spoon? A single drop? 2. I'll be fine. We're not going to beat ourselves up about that. A little bit more about, well, this is opening up a little bit. A little bit more about Deveron. This distillery is almost coastal. It's very near the north coast in the Moray Firth. And it's just south of the town of Banff, if you want to look it up on a map. And on the left-hand side of the distillery facing north, you will find the River Devon, after which this brand is named, although it comes from Macduff Distillery. And the reason, in my opinion, and it's just an opinion, why they're calling it Deveron rather than Macduff is because Macduff single malt, when it appears from the independent bottlers, is considered a non-event and uninspiring and non-aspirational, rather like Strathmill, another good example, or Speyside, another good example, or Speyburn, another good example, or Glenkeith, great example. These are single malts which generally are of little interest to single malt drinkers because they're characterless. I'm just relaying the message, folks. In this presentation, I think that the distillery is cashing in on the significantly increased demand for single malts. And whereas this would normally disappear into blends like Dewar's, it's being presented as a single malt because people are buying single malts. And the distillery want to earn some money due to this. So by naming it Deveron, and particularly in a supermarket, by giving it a sort of aquamarine type label, which will make it stand out, jump out colour-wise on a supermarket shelf underneath that fluorescent lighting, they're simply doing what any business would do in making their product accessible. So good for them. As regards the rather anemic character, and I don't mean that judgmentally, I mean it objectively, and I'll come back to this shortly in the taste. Macduff is a young distillery. It was built in the 1960s, early 1960s, in fact about 1962, so it's roughly about 60 years old. And as such, it's a generation of distilleries that were built for convenience of location and availability of land, rather than being situated for the provenance of singular style and character. Because as a distillery, it never needed it, because it was built to become blend filler, to package out grain whisky into Scotch blended whisky by being a malt component that was never particularly taking the whisky in any direction. So, mission accomplished. But you see this with many modern large distilleries. Roseisle, good example. Kinninvie, another good example. Distilleries which were never located in a position of feng shui or provenance. They were located using other calculation dynamics, which are based on finance and expediency. And it's interesting that you don't see much in the way of single malts from either Roseisle or from Kinninvie. They just don't really, they're not out there. If they were good single malts, in my opinion, they would be out there. But something can get lost in efficiency and scale which is why larger distilleries, I think, struggle to find their identity compared to smaller distilleries, which often acquire theirs accidentally. But anyway, I'm starting to digress away from this, so back to the Deveron here. I would say that the specialist bottle shops, when they carry the other bottlings of Deveron with the diamond-shaped labels, you're actually getting a slightly more decent full whiskey, which is slightly better casks behind it. I think this has been a version that's been produced strictly on a budget for supermarkets and for mass retail. No harm in it because, as I mentioned briefly, this is a clean, refreshing, simple. The key word here is simple. It's a simple single malt. And frankly, there's no harm in that. If you're just getting into your whiskey, discovering single malt for the first time, and you don't want to be frightened with the likes of Talisker or Springbank or Laphroaig. Some people are frightened by them, even after a few years' experience. So back to the smell and taste of this before the malty mark. Simple, honest, grain, slightly honeyed, simple. Sweet. Sour in the development. Sweet and toffeed rather than honey. It's toffeed in the arrival. Interesting enough. Very palatable. Refreshingly honest, to be honest. I'm not going to be a snob about it. I wouldn't rush to buy this whiskey again, but hey, if I was starting out, I'd thoroughly enjoy this, and it's good to have a bottle of this to share with for people who are frightened of whiskey, because there's nothing frightening about this. Finish is very swift, very sudden. It's gone. Tiny little bit of gingeriness, a little bit of tannins, bit of fresh, mild grapefruit and grain. It's gone. Malt mark. It's not going to blow your socks off, but it will keep your boat afloat. A nice, simple, unpretentious, honest whiskey. Sure, if it was bottled at Integrity style, it would hugely improve it, but we're not seeing that, so there we go. Malt mark, 81 out of 100, malt mates, for this single malt. I hope you've enjoyed my review. Hope you'll pop back again for Ralphie Review 890 Extras, in which I will be talking a little bit more about this whiskey and my thoughts on it. Just giving you a sort of general overview. And I'll just be slightly freewheeling it, because I've got things in the back of my mind which are really kind of worth bringing to the... I've not really discussed in a video before, actually. You know, all the different permutations of a single malt. That's basically what it is. But for any more information, you're going to have to watch that video. It'll be along shortly. In the meantime, you take care of yourself. Bye-bye.